So ladies, the topic of today's video is how to gain true inner confidence after a lifetime of abuse. And I say ladies specifically because unfortunately, chivalry is dead. And so the concept of a gentleman no longer exists. I'm just fucking with you. But let's get into this. I want to talk about basically how to rebuild your confidence after you've been abused and traumatized throughout the majority of your childhood. Now, I want to preface this with clarifying the idea of confidence because more often than not, people tend to think that confidence equals thinking that you're the best out of a potential room of people. But what we have to understand, very important, is that confidence does not equal comparison. Confidence rather equals presence. So confidence is when you're fully present walking into a room, and the idea of what people think about you or who's better or who's worse doesn't even cross your mind. You're just fully present, immersed in the moment, and you know your own worth. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the main topic of this video. So what I'm going to do here is we're going to break down what causes the lack of confidence as a result of abuse, bring awareness to all different aspects of it, and then once it's time for the board flip, you will see on the other side of this board are basically the, solutions or the methods, techniques of how to overcome and heal your trauma so that you can find your true self again and be happy to be authentic and show your true self to the world without any limiting beliefs or limitations around who you are and that whether or not you should show that to the world, which obviously we know that you should, but for whatever reasons, whatever things that we've been through, we tend to hide ourselves and shrink ourselves. So yeah, let's get started. So before I begin right over here, I'm just going to give you a quick background about myself because chances are you have no idea who I am and why you should listen to me. So I was obese, I was broke, I was a virgin at 21, and basically nothing in my life was going the way that I wanted it to. And so I basically eventually came to the realization that that was due to my own traumas, my own limiting beliefs that I had. And after doing a lot of this work and basically understanding my own psychology at a much deeper level, I managed to work on myself to a point where I started to love myself. And from that place, was able to begin to achieve everything I ever wanted. So now I'm in great physical shape, obviously hidden by this beautiful jacket, which you will probably get to see one day, hopefully. And I make money online from a third world country. I work in remote sales, so high ticket sales for those of you that are familiar with it. And I'm in a much better place when it comes to relationships and trusting people. So yeah, I'd argue I'm, in a good place to explain this stuff. So to get started, when it comes to trauma, you have to understand there's always an origin experience. And so what comes as a result of these experiences is the trauma that you experience. So these experiences are either intense, or they're frequent, or they're both, right? So when I say intense, I mean emotionally intense. So you have emotionally intense experiences that are very frequent, or you have one very emotionally intense experience that could scar you for life. And so these come from physical and or emotional abuse. So you can be abused physically, you can be abused emotionally. And what a lot of people tend to do is that if they haven't been physically abused, they tend to downplay and minimize their trauma because, well, to them, their parents never hit them, so therefore they grew up with good parenting, which 90% of the time isn't the case, and most cases of complex trauma are a result of emotional abuse. And so the results of emotional abuse are pretty much equal, if not worse, than the results of physical abuse, which will lead into what they teach the child. But it's important to note that emotional abuse doesn't only have to be literally abusive, it could also be a lack of emotional empathy, or a lack of emotional validation. So emotional neglect basically is what I'm getting at. And that can also cause complex trauma. So feeling like your feelings are not valid, feeling that you should suppress your emotions, feeling a sense of punishment or remorse from whoever your parent or figure of authority is as a result of you showing emotion can also trigger results of complex trauma. So the examples of this are the following. Getting told that you're not good enough or that you could have done better. So this is something that I often hear happen in, Asian parts of the world, where no matter how well a child performs, there's always an expectation for the child to do better. And so they're always getting hit with this idea of, you could have done better, you didn't do good enough, even though you did well, it's not enough to receive my love or my validation, which we're going to get to next. Another example of this is, why can't you be more like X? So for example, why can't you be more like your brother? Why can't you be more like the son of said uncle or said person? And oftentimes we have parents, when they have this sort of lens, they're very critical of not only themselves, but they project that onto their children. So they're critical of their children, or of you in this case. So criticism plus neglect, plus, I think it's worth noting, inconsistency. So you can have a parent who's inconsistent when it comes to validating you, when it comes to praising you. You can have times where, based off their emotions, generally is how they will decide to praise you or criticize you. And so that sort of keeps you guessing and builds a sort of pattern in your brain that keeps you guessing of whether or not you're doing things right or not. You have overprotective parents. This can also lead to the detriment of your confidence because you get the idea that your judgment isn't, worthy of following through with, and you always have to seek a second opinion. Bullying, this can be through a parent, this can be through school, We know what bullying does. It basically completely destroys your self-worth and your self-image. And then finally, as a last example, obviously there's more to this, but these are just quick examples that I came up with for the sake of context, is getting hit even for minor things. So you can have a parent who's extremely reactive, who will grab the belt and beat the shit out of you, even for you just breaking a glass of water, for example. So these are the origin experiences, and it's important to become aware of them, to keep a memory of them, to keep a record of them. And then what happens as a result of them is, because your brain as a child is egocentric, you tend to believe that the world revolves around you. Because again, you're egocentric, you haven't developed to the point of understanding the idea of there exists other people, and you haven't really developed empathy yet. So again, the world revolves around you, and as a result, everything relates to you, whether good or bad. And anything bad that happens, if your parents beat you up, or even something unrelated to you, such as your parents fighting with each other, you blame yourself for that. Again, because you believe that the world revolves around you and you're very egocentric. And so, again, this comes down to the idea of you having an inability to rationalize things. So you take everything at, again, the world revolves around you and you take it emotionally. There is no rationalization of whatever situation is taking place, and you internalize everything. So I'll give you a very quick example of something that is happening right now in the world. There is a certain part of the world, let's just call it the Middle East, where there's rockets raining down on children and families and civilians. And what's important to realize is that for these children, they don't have the ability to rationalize the fact that there's a conflict between two governments that can't reach an agreement, therefore there's a war, and as a result, they are collateral damage to this war. So what happens in the brain of such children is that they internalize these things, they blame themselves for these things, and they develop a belief that, I'm such a bad person, I'm such a bad child that I deserve to have these rockets raining down on me, and I deserve to die. That's the point, that's the extent to which I'm unworthy, and I'm worthless, and I'm a bad person. Now, when these things happen, in your brain, again, when I say your brain, I'm talking to the inner child in you, you develop a survival response. And the reason for the survival response is not because of your actual physical safety, although that is important. It's because of LVS. What is LVS? It's your 3 core needs as a child. So love, validation, and security. All right? So in situations like this, where you've had intense and frequent experiences that you perceive as your fault, right? So you internalize these things, you want to develop a survival response because your core needs are not being met. Your core needs being love, validation, and security. So because you don't feel love, because you don't feel validated, because you don't feel secure, you develop a survival response. Now, we've heard of these ones. You have fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But again, these 4 responses that we don't really have to get in depth into, which I could make another video on someday, these 4 responses are a response to not getting your 3 core needs met, love, validation, and security. And basically what you're trying to do here is get love, validation, and security. So you're adopting any one of these 4 or any combination of these 4 in order to eventually receive love, validation, and security, as mentioned here. So because you do this, what you tend to do, again, is that you tend to shrink, you tend to hide yourself, you tend to not express your emotions, and so as you do these things, you start to find a sense of potentially peace. So instead of your parents shitting on you for expressing emotions, there's either no response, or you're being praised for being quiet and not being annoying, and not being loud, and not being intrusive. And so these lead into deeper patterns, which are learned beliefs and learned behaviors. So the learned beliefs and behaviors, and we could probably add feelings to that, are feelings of worthlessness, believing that you're worthless, believing that your feelings are invalid, believing that love is earned and that it is conditional. So for example, I hear a lot of parents tell their children that if you don't stop misbehaving, I won't love you, or I won't love you as much as I did, which goes back to the idea that love is earned, which obviously as we grow older we develop ourselves into a position where we're able to rationalize things and understand different people, different situations, and put ourselves in other people's shoes, we can understand that love is conditional for the most part. But it is crucial to have unconditional love from our parents, which oftentimes we are deprived of this birthright. And so as a result, we can also often feel like we're a burden, and then we can feel a deep sense of guilt and shame as a result of all these other things, right? Just guilt and shame just for being ourselves, just for existing, which is very detrimental to the development of us as children. So you learn that shrinking equals you being accepted. You learn that an expression of feelings equals punishment. You learn that a lack of praise will lead you to take action in a way that you will try to be perfectionistic, in a sense. I don't know if that made sense or if I phrased that the right way, but what I mean here is you not getting praised means that you're going to try to be perfect because you think that maybe if I'm perfect, then I will receive the love, validation, and security that I've been looking for. And again, you learn that love is conditional. So this is the basically root cause of perfectionism. Parents never validate you. They never give you a sense of love and security. And so you keep trying and trying and trying, and you get this sort of idea that what if I'm perfect? What if I do everything right? Then there's nothing for them to criticize. Then finally I can receive love, validation, and security. And that is why you keep trying to be a perfectionist. And so what's really important to know here, as we get towards the end of the awareness stage before the board flip, is that energy is greater than beliefs. And so basically what beliefs require to survive and to grow is energy, right? Energy is basically emotion, and emotions, energy, and motion. And so basically your beliefs want to keep you recreating these same emotions of worthlessness, guilt, shame, feeling like a burden, feeling that your feelings are invalid. And so what happens is that as you walk through life with all of this trauma, with all of this baggage, you will start to find that you're unconsciously recreating scenarios and circumstances that bring up emotions that you felt when said beliefs were formed. So basically, in order for these beliefs to survive and to keep sucking up your energy, they're going to recreate circumstances that are going to bring up the same feelings that you felt as a child, and that's going to throw you into an emotional flashback. And that emotional flashback is going to put you back in a state as if you were back there as a child, feeling those feelings again. So you're in a fully survival state, right? And then that's going to reinforce the beliefs that you have about yourself, which are very harmful. And so just to clarify this, emotional flashbacks are just like flashbacks in normal situations of PTSD. So you hear people who go to war and they get these very vivid flashbacks of their friend dying right next to them in the trenches. And it's like they're back in that moment again. But what's interesting with complex trauma is that you don't get actual visual flashbacks of these situations, because it's like your brain stores them in somewhere so deep so that they're never reachable, so you never have to experience that pain again, right? And as a result, your flashbacks switch from actual vivid, tangible flashbacks into emotional flashbacks. So instead of actually seeing the experience again, you feel the experience again, and your body is put in a place where it feels like it's back in that moment in which you were experiencing trauma as a child. And so you're back into a state of survival. You're back into either combination of these four survival response types: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, which is up to you to determine, and you can do the introspection and figure out. But this is very worthy of noting, because these emotional flashbacks come as a result of you recreating experiences because your beliefs want to survive and want to basically take more energy. And so you're getting thrown into a flashback. That flashback is going to bring up the same feelings, and as a result, your beliefs are going to be reinforced around shame, guilt, worthlessness, feeling like a burden, belief that your feelings are invalid, etc., etc. So, ladies, it's time for the board flip. So, if any of that resonated with you, please let me know in the comments and give me any ideas or suggestions you might have as to what I could add or how I could improve, because obviously the more feedback I get, the better I can make these videos, and the more easy to digest and understand and internalize I can make them, so that more and more people can benefit from this type of understanding and work. So when it comes to healing, the first step you're going to have is acceptance. When I say acceptance, I mean accepting the fact that you've been through some shit, accepting the fact that you might have been harmed, accepting the fact that there might be some shit to work on for you to be able to be normal or become better as a result of working on your traumas. And so you have to understand that you cannot heal what you reject. You can't heal what you reject. If you deny something, you deny its existence, and how can you work on it, right? And so this begs the question, how do some traumatized people live very normal lives? Because there's a lot of people who've been through a bunch of shit, who've never done the internal work, who seem to live very normal lives. They seem to have their shit together. They seem to make money. They seem to do this, to do that. Now, what's important to realize is that a lot of people wear masks. They wear masks. They basically have a rational understanding of how a normal person lives their life, and they put the mask of that normal person on for themselves. But it's not coming from a place of authenticity. It's not coming from a place of peace and internal harmony. And so deep down, these people are suffering when they're alone in bed at night. The general mood or feelings that they have aren't very satisfactory. And so that's not the aim that we're looking for here. We're not looking to appear confident, to appear normal on the exterior. We're looking to become our best selves, reconnect with our true selves, so that we don't have to live these feelings of anxiety, of pain, of worthlessness, feeling like we're not good enough, feeling like there's something inherently wrong with us. What matters, first and foremost, is that internal peace, that internal harmony. And then from there, we can start to think about the external stuff. Think about the relationships. Think about the abundance and money that we want to make. So yeah. Now guys, step 2 is a decision. A decision that whatever I've been through will no longer affect me. I won't let it rule my life. I won't use it as an excuse. I won't minimize it. I won't victimize myself for it. So what a lot of people do who experienced trauma is they either minimize it or they victimize themselves. So I'm always late because I've been through trauma, or I can't make money because of my trauma, or I can't attract this person because of my trauma, or I can't get in shape because of my trauma. I keep emotionally eating because of my trauma. This is the victim mindset that we want to completely eliminate, and it's as easy as a decision. And the other people who've been through trauma will tend to minimize it. So, oh, it wasn't so bad. It's kind of like a denial paradigm around trauma. It wasn't so bad. I'm okay. I'm living a good life. I have relationships. I have friends, this and that. But are you truly satisfied internally? No. So the second decision that we want to make is that I will do the work Now, when I say I will do the work, that means I'm going to be extremely self-honest about what I believe to be true about myself. Because a lot of people, again, they have masks on. They tell themselves that they're fine. They tell themselves that they're confident. But what they truly believe about themselves deep down is that they're losers, is that they're not good enough, is that there's something intrinsically and inherently wrong with them. So we want to remove all the masks. We want to be completely self-honest and decide that we will do the work. Because again, once you accept your flaws, once you accept the toxic beliefs that you have about yourself, then you can work on them from there. But you can't work on yourself by denying the negative things that you believe about yourself. And so third step is beliefs. We want to reframe our beliefs around what overcoming and healing trauma looks like. So to start off, it's easy. It's very easy. A lot of people get this idea that it's a journey and it's going to take time and it's long and it's hard, which it isn't. It's easy. It doesn't take years either. It doesn't have to take years unless you believe it does. And it's not a journey. A lot of people say, oh, I've gotten better, but I'm on a journey. It's a journey. That's bullshit. It is a journey in a sense, but you don't want to keep reminding yourself of that. Because again, you've decided that it won't affect you. So this is no longer a part of your vocabulary. And then finally, the fourth step is work. You're going to do the work. You're going to, again, go back to the decision. You decided that you're going to do the work. And then finally, the fourth step is to do the work after having accepted, made the decisions, and changed your beliefs around overcoming and healing your trauma. Now, obviously, this begs the question of Eagle. How do I do the work? What is the work, right? And we're going to start with this very simple framework, which is what I call the 3 R's, which are recognize, reject, and replace. Now, this can be done on 2 different levels, and ideally, it's going to be done on both of these levels, the cognitive and the emotional level. So when it comes to the cognitive, that means recognizing the inner critic, recognizing the outer critic, recognizing your toxic beliefs, and then rejecting them, and then replacing them. So the inner critic comes as a result of what you basically emotionally experienced as a child. If your parents were always critical of you, you're going to be critical of yourself. And if you have an outer critic, that is also a result of your inner critic basically projecting itself onto the world. So you're going to be critical of people, critical of the way people drive, critical of the way people dress, critical of how different systems are flawed, like governments or political systems or economic systems, and that is your outer critic. But instead of just accepting them as being part of the world and then moving on with your life, and then recognizing your toxic beliefs. So again, toxic beliefs are negative things that you believe about yourself that we've spoken about before, and you can reject that, recognize that, reject it, and then replace it. Okay, so this is all on the cognitive level. And then beyond that is the emotional side of things. So what's important to note here is that all of these things have been ingrained into you because of the fact that emotions exist. If you were not emotional, if you were unable to feel emotions, then none of this would have ever happened. And so in order to overcome it, you're going to have to feel these emotions again. You're going to have to recognize feelings, attitudes, and things that you lacked. Then you're going to reject that and replace it, right? But when it comes to the emotional side of things, it's a bit deeper because you can't just think your way out of your trauma. You can't just use logic, right? And then heal a traumatized subconscious mind that you have. Because the language of the subconscious is emotion. I don't know if you've heard this before, if you watched other people who talk about manifestation and things like that. But everything that is in your subconscious has been put in there through emotion. And so you're going to have to process these emotions that you've suppressed, process all the emotions. You're going to have to relive the trauma as a rational adult. So you're going to have to re-experience them. You're going to have to sit down, meditate, remember the times, remember the experiences that traumatized you the most, and experience them and feel the pain that you felt. But you're going to see them from a rather rational perspective this time because you're a fully grown adult. And then you're going to have to grieve. You're going to have to grieve all the things that you lacked. You're going to have to grieve the fact that you experienced these things. You're going to have to grieve all the things that came as a result of you experiencing these traumas. Because otherwise you won't overcome them. And you're going to keep repeating the same cycles and loops until the day that you die. And so one thing that helps here to reframe things is the law of polarity, or the idea of polarity. So basically, right around the middle here is what we can call normal, or 0, right? Strong emotional charge can be transmuted into emotional intelligence. Strong emotional charge can be transmuted into emotional intelligence. This is a result of polarity. You go from one end to the polar opposite, right? So if your emotional charge was right around here, then you'd reach an emotional intelligence level that is right around here. Basically the polar opposite of it. So the more that you've experienced an emotional charge, the more that you can become emotionally intelligent, and you can apply this as a general rule to basically whatever you want. So again, in this example, we have worthlessness, which you can transmute into a very high sense of self-worth. So the more that you're, the more that you felt worthless, and the more that your self-worth, so the more that you felt worthless, and the more that your self-worth was destroyed, is the extent to which you can increase your self-worth and make it a very high sense of self-worth. Now, thanks to polarity and the idea of polarity, we can reframe the way that we look at traumas. So instead of having this perception around them that is so negative and so depressing, because we basically have gotten to a point that we understand the extent to which it has been a detriment to our lives, we can just decide to reframe it. Because if you look at the lives of normal people who had normal upbringings, I'm not going to say extremely healthy ones, but they were in no sense detrimental to their development. They just had normal upbringings with normal parents, no traumas, nothing excessive, right? They live very normal lives. But people who have been traumatized and overcome their traumas and work on their traumas will always become more powerful than someone who's never experienced something painful. So why don't we just love our traumas? We can just love them because they're a gift. They are what is going to allow us to basically become stronger than we've ever been. And had we not gone through trauma, we would not have the potentiality to become as strong as we truly want to be. So yeah, you can love your traumas, you can be grateful for them. Because what is a life without trauma? Just some boring upbringing, middle class. There's no suffering, there's no pain. There's no pain to alchemize into pleasure and into strength. So it's kind of lame. So I'm grateful for my traumas. I hope you are too. And now we can finally get into the last step of overcoming and healing. So the last step is action. When I say action, I mean your relational actions, how you act in relationships, whether that's family members, friends, personal relationships, as well as your behavioral actions. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to learn to trust. You're going to start to trust people again. You're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to be willing to have your heart broken and trust people with, not hurting you or being vulnerable. So you're going to have to find peace in being vulnerable. And you're going to have to do things that make you feel shame. So examples of this are posting on social media. I knew that I was always reluctant to post, even just normal pictures, not like videos of me talking, but just like normal pictures of myself as I go through my day-to-day, as I go on vacation. I never wanted to post anything because I always felt a sense of deep shame because I was putting myself out there. And so that's an example of something that you can do that made you feel shame that now you're more willing to do. Again, this is the final step, so you do this after you've done all of that work, because otherwise that could lead to you reinforcing the shame through the beliefs that you already have. Another example of this is saying no to people, setting boundaries, and not being a pushover, not being a people pleaser, insulting people, fighting people, fuck it. And then over here are basically the last behavioral action that you're gonna have to do. So you're gonna have to be self-compassionate, and I've put always in caps over here because it's crucial to understand that there is no point, there is no circumstance ever where it is excusable for you to not be self-compassionate. Because a lot of people decide that they're going to be self-hating and self-deprecating because they're being honest with themselves. And they excuse that self-deprecation through honesty, which is in no way valid or logical. And there's always room for more self-compassion, and you will never have a reason to not be self-compassionate. So again, be self-compassionate always. Delete perfectionism, delete the idea of perfectionism, and understand that more often than not, your experience and your journey of overcoming your traumas and your own pains and your own scars is going to be 2 steps forward and then 1 step back. So there you have it. That's basically 8 years, 7 years of trauma in 25 minutes. I'm guessing this is going to be 25, 30 minutes. And I hope that you found it valuable. And I'm always open to more and more suggestions and ideas that you might have. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So don't forget to drop a like, as all these YouTubers say. Subscribe, leave a comment, leave suggestions, insults, whatever. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this, and I'll see you soon. Peace.